Something's happened. The Tories have officially run out of ideas. It's becoming common knowledge that Britain is going down the drain. Now, Tory supporters are harder to find than Bill Gates' Epstein Island alibi. And all we hear in the media organisations is a decline narrative. However, it might be worse. As historian Adam Tooze points out, this narrative might very well obscure the unique challenge of the current situation. You see, wherever you look, productivity, wage growth, investment, public services, the scale of this economic disaster is unprecedented in modern industrial history. So what changed? The traditional left narrative often presents a horrific vision of Tory rule since Thatcher, of public services deteriorating, stagnating living standards, followed by COVID disaster, PPE corruption, awkward cheating, bad hair, and right-wing nerds. However, you begin to wonder, if they've done everything but sacrifice a child to the gods of capitalism, how have they managed to stay in power? And what does the breakdown of this magic formula explain as to why we're so completely... As many scandals do, it all starts in the 1970s and the crisis of profitability. The economic model that created the suburbs, rock and roll, the automotive revolution, and the NHS had begun to crack at the seams. The US had abandoned the inflationary check of the gold standard, increasing global competition at a time when productivity was on the downtrend. When the energy crisis triggered by the OPEC oil embargo followed, it was the spark that lit the fuse, and the developed world entered a period known as stagflation. Now, stagflation is a very complicated concept that I'm sure few living in this gilded era of prosperity can understand. But just try to imagine inflation going through the roof and wages not following. Politicians in the insurgent right responded to this problem by doing what they do best: make things easier for rich people to make money. A spate of laws passed cracking down on the big industrial unions and facilitating the relocation of their industries to countries with cheap labour. In other words, China. Industries were privatised, so wealth was transferred from the public to private sector, and on top of all of this, globally regulations of finance were relaxed to allow profits from the real economy that companies were reluctant to reinvest to expand through financial speculation on a level not seen since the Great Depression. Now, I'm sure you're thinking, after all of this, I've seen The Big Short. I know everything about economics, and what more can this random British dude teach me? And you might have a point, but I'm more interested in what happened after 2008 than the financial crisis. In other words, the pile of shit we call the British economy today. In this area, Brett Christophers produces some useful insights with his synthesis of scholarship under the term rentier capitalism. This essentially describes a system where if producing more stuff no longer pays, the government decides it's a good idea to allow people to gamble with this money and sell off public property, and allowing monopolies to extract exorbitant rents through enhanced IP protections. As the saying goes, if you can't make new products, make new assets and encourage the middle class and foreign speculators to vie for this capital base. If you thought this sounds shit, you'd be right. And if you thought this sounds unsustainable, you'd also be right. You see, this worked as long as the working class of Generation X and the boomers were able to buy up their council house, and the middle class benefited from the asset price inflation caused by the narrowing of the active housing supply. Slight problems with this though. Firstly, their kids were fucked. And we don't produce anything anymore. This meant that the country became divided between financial and job centres, with food banks replacing BHS. And of course, this is just a theoretical, but imagine if you don't make shit. You could be vulnerable to climate crises, or energy crises, or PPE crises. Plus, you run into the unfortunate problem of your economy being entirely reliant on the rarely strong and stable financial sector. And this leads to where we're at now. A radical right-wing government comes into power, promising to bring back stuff and growth and happiness and fairies, and temporarily crashes this very volatile market. And then the Prime Minister that leads this government transforms into a lettuce. And guess who she's replaced with? Another ideas man talking about revitalising the economy? No, this guy, who, like the economy, is a very, very rich bubble waiting to burst. And that's why the Tories have no plan.
One of my New Year's promises to you was to grow the economy, and today we're announcing the second round of allocations from our Levelling Up Fund, and that's about investing in local areas in order to create jobs and help deliver on that promise to boost growth.